So I promised Lual that I would be his Oprah today. Although there are no really fancy gift boxes underneath your chairs. Sorry about that. So our reflections today are a conversation, ostensibly between the two of us, but really broader, with all of you, with the community Lual has left and everything that he's reaching forward toward in the United States. So my first question, Lual, the theme of our service is letting go, something that we all have to do in 1,000 ways in our lives. As we have gotten to know each other, which has been so fun, also, he's very much a millennial, which makes me feel cooler as a Gen X person. You've shared a little bit about your story, and one of the things that I learned is that you and your family have had to let go twice in completely different ways. Your family fleeing the violence in South Sudan for resettlement in northern Uganda in the early 90s, and then the ongoing tribal warfare and the promise of opportunity calling you to once again let go of the only home you'd ever known, which is that refugee camp in northern Uganda, and leave Africa altogether and come here to the United States. Could you tell us a little bit about what you have been asked to let go of in both of these changes, and what it's like to let go of a whole way of life, not just once, but twice?
Wow, thank you so much. My name is Lual Mayen. I'm actually from South Sudan. To my understanding, sometimes letting go can be so painful, but it is part of our life. To me, is that in 1983, the war broke out in South Sudan, and it actually resulted into a tribal war in 1991, where actually my parents were affected, and they had to leave the country and find where they can find peace. And through that, they had to suffer, they had to find, like, they have to cross rivers, they have to, they were so hungry, there was no food to eat, and everything. So it was not only my family, but almost like 3,000 people were actually killed in 1991. So, and they had to find a refuge. It took them almost 3 years for them to reach to Uganda, in the northern Uganda. So, but on their journey, they didn't actually know where they were going. They were just like moving on the way in the bush to find where they can actually rest and they can feed their children, they can raise up their children. But leaving South Sudan was so painful to them because it was their home. It was it was what they have. So keeping cattle, and the culture was so good to them, and it was really so nice for them.
So in 1983, this politically motivated war broke out in South Sudan, and your whole family had to flee. By 1991, this whole scene had escalated into full-scale tribal warfare, and the whole-scale destruction of villages, particularly targeting the Dinka people, which is your own people. So your family had no choice but to flee in that time, since they were straight up under threat of immediate execution. And your parents didn't have a choice about whether or not to flee. They went. Your two older sisters, they went, they packed everything up and made their way toward what ultimately would be northern Uganda and some relative safety. Your family were migrants for 3 years. And in fact, you were born on the trail. Your mother was walking while pregnant with you toward a destination she did not yet know. And you were born in the midst of that road. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like for you and your family to travel, certainly, but ultimately to come to rest in that refugee camp in northern Uganda, which is the only home you had ever known until you came here to the US?
Thank you so much. Actually, when my parents were actually moving on the way, almost my sister was almost eaten by an animal because on their way back to Uganda. So then in 1993, I was born in the border of Uganda and South Sudan. And, it was it was something that they had. They had to do it. Like my mom had to do it. So, and to my understanding, actually, my father was not there. So it was actually my mom and the children, because when they find a man, they kill a man. So my father had to make sure that he actually moved separately. So they united
He couldn't
again.
travel with you at all.
Yes, because when they find all of us, and then they will kill my father and others. Yeah.
So one of the things that was so surprising to me, though it should not have been, is when I first asked you about life in the refugee camp, I confess that I had all sorts of assumptions. And all of my assumptions were just blown away, because I kind of thought when I asked you about life in the refugee camp that you were going to tell me about what it was like to have limited resources and relate some sadness about that experience, when in fact you've said that at that time the camp, which was the only home you'd ever known, was the best possible place that you could be. You didn't know what you didn't have in terms of resources, and what you did have was this community and this culture that wrapped itself around you, and a way of connecting that is the one thing you miss the most about Africa today, those cultural connections. Could you talk a little bit about what it meant to leave that camp as you started to contemplate the whole next phases of your life?
Yeah, actually reaching the refugee camp was the best thing we could have. Because my parents could actually, raise up the children in peace. It was better than compared to South Sudan, and we could actually get some, some food from the UNHCR. So, and we actually go to school. So there was nothing which was better than that, and we were locked in that same area. So we didn't know there's something better than the life in the refugee camp. So, and we had to utilize all the resources we had in the refugees camp. So, and we managed to keep our cattle, and actually in the picture you can see like I was actually keeping cattle for my father in the refugee camp. So it was our home. It was all what we had. We were so happy, and yeah.
This is my favorite picture ever of you just like smiling a smile that could crack the world open, riding a motorcycle. That's so fantastic. And one of the things I also learned is that in the refugee camp in northern Uganda, Lual's family and the entire community, in fact, pooled their resources to send grain and food back to South Sudan.
Yes.
So from the midst of the refugee camp, you were leveraging your ability to help the people back in your home country.
Yes, we have almost 2.5 million South Sudan refugees. Some ended up in Uganda, others in Kenya, others in Ethiopia. So, and the reason why, actually in South Sudan we have 1.2 IDPs, people internal displaced. So they have nowhere to run out of the country. So, and there's no way they can get food. So some of my uncles are back in South Sudan. We could actually share what we have with them and send back to South Sudan, because it is actually very hard to find food and everything in South Sudan. So, yeah.
People help each other. As a refugee, you're helping the people who can't get out.
Yeah,
and in
yeah.
fact, the next image that I want to show is it's a bed covering, is what it is. What
Yeah.
you're looking at here is a picture of an embroidered bed cover. It is one that your mother made in the refugee camp in Uganda. And in fact, one story Lual told me is that when he was able at one time to go out of the camp and make a certain amount of money, he bought his mother a loom that would help her make in greater quantities these bed coverings and furniture coverings. This is her craft, it's her profession. She does tailoring and she creates these beautiful things. And bed coverings like this paid for your first computer, which means that her work and her labor is what financed your education. It's an education that brought you into the world of technology and that made so many things possible for you. Is there anything you'd like to add about the relationship between your mother's commitment and your call to build peace in the world today?
Yeah, actually, with my mom, she really struggled so hard. In South Sudan, mostly that women are not valued. And the most important thing they are known of is their house. They do only home housework. And when we were displaced, my mom took that opportunity to use her skill. Actually, she went for some short courses to learn tailoring in order to let us go to school. And after that, she was actually working in the school, cooking for the children. And we were actually there in the school. so we had a lot of advantages, and she could use bed covers, and then after selling them, she gets some money, and then that's how I went to my high school, and she paid for my school fees. So, and the most important thing I did was to make sure that I utilized all I had in the refugee camp and at the school, and also to pay back my mom, because it is not something easy like for you to go to school when you're in the refugee camp. There are a lot of people over there, but they're not utilizing every chance they're having. So I really, it was a very good time that mom used to to use her skill in order to to take me to school and to study. And yes, buy my first computer, it was exciting. And when she bought a computer, she doesn't actually know what a computer is. So even right now, she doesn't know what I'm doing, or even the game that I'm developing. What do I use to develop game? What she wants is the best for me. So I had to utilize that chance, yeah.
I remember when we were talking, I asked, is your mom worried about you because you're so far away from her? And you were like, no, she's so happy I'm safe and here and able to realize your dreams. And this is where it gets really fun. It is hard for me to even wrap my mind around all that is and has been possible for you, not just because of the demand that you let go of so much, but because of the amazing pull of your own calling in the world. So of course, you ultimately wound up through the work of your mother and the support of so many at a school in Uganda where you learned about science and technology, and you learned about leadership, really. And though you had always had some natural engineering skills, seriously, like you give him a bicycle and he could electrify an entire village. It's astonishing. Though you already had these skills in design and in engineering, you found a way through education and through your connections to connect your talents to the deep need of your people. And today you are here in the US in part to live out your own vision of building peace in South Sudan through technology and gaming. Specifically, Lual is the founder and CEO of Janub Games. Janub Games is this internationally supported, when I say internationally supported, I mean the World Bank, Amazon.com, internationally supported effort to design and distribute games in war-torn areas of South Sudan. He has 6,000 South Sudanese youth who are clandestinely connected via social media to him and to his work. And these young people who are in the very midst of intertribal conflict are having peace implanted in their brains through gaming and through social media. I recently asked you, can we make peace a product? Can we market peace like other people seem so bent on marketing violence? And with all of this joy, you said yes. So can you tell us a little bit more about your calling, about what you do, and about everything you have had to let go of being related to everything you are moving on toward in your life and in your work?
Yeah, I will start by saying my mom is so happy for me to be here, actually, because when we were in the refugee camp in 2001, there was resettlement. And my family applied to be resettled to either Canada or the US. And we failed almost 5 times for us to come here. So I had no hope of actually coming to the US or actually going to Canada or any other country. So I was just lucky, I know I was going to live just in that refugee camp. So, and we always have our calling and we always have our gift. And it is very hard for you to realize who you are, but when your time comes, it's always your time, no matter what. So in January, I was invited to come to go to San Francisco for GDC, Game Developers Conference. It's one of the biggest game festival, but I couldn't make it. I was unlucky that I was invited in January on 27, and then on the 28th, President Trump issued a travel ban. So that actually discouraged me a lot. 5 times denial, and then in January, I was not gonna make it because South Sudan was not part of it, but the custom could not differentiate between Sudan and South Sudan. So that I couldn't make it. And making peace as a product, we can let go of so many things. I am here today in the US, but my heart, I want to make sure I can live all the dream I have here, but I want to make sure that also my brothers and my sisters in South Sudan are also fine. And the problem in South Sudan is that 73% of the population is under the age of 30. And these are people that are used as a tool of war. In 2014, the ceasefire was made by the international community. They tried their best to restore peace back in the country, but it couldn't work out. Why? Because the 73% are not in the government, but they are used as a tool of war. Their mindset, their attitude, their perception is different. The children are born in war and raised up in war. So, and I realized that when I had the gift of and the skill of technology, which I used from which I studied, I came up with a video game because these are same people, the youth that they use video game for entertainment. And when they play every day with peace game, slowly by slowly, it can change their mindset. Even the children in the high school, the children in elementary school, the more they play game, the more it brings them together. And slowly by slowly, we can restore peace back in South Sudan. So, and sure, yes, peace can be as a product in so many ways. And that is where I want the world to go to. It's not all about talking, but at least bringing something that engage people together. So, and that's why I came up with the idea of Genook game. And yeah, I managed to develop 3 games when I was in the refugee camp. And actually the pictures you're seeing, they were what I did in the refugee camp. I distributed some of the game in the refugees. And yeah, there's always that grace that God gave to us. It's working us every time. So, and I'm really so happy with that.
You're almost clandestinely implanting peace in people's minds, one game at a time, which is so astonishing and so powerful. And is there anything else that you wanted to add before we finish our time today? Yeah,
thank you so much. I want to say thank you, the River Road. And, we can do all these things together. As you can see, this is now. I mean, it's now. Being in the US, I have that environment. I have all the tools that I can, I managed to meet with all the game developers around the world, and we are working together. The game industry before was war game, the Star Wars and everything, but I'm really talking to all the game designers and the tool that I'm having right now to make sure that I produce better games. I just don't want to say, but thank to my host, Mike and Teresa, and then Nancy and Reverend Ruiz and everybody. Thank you for being part of my life, and I know I will do more than this. And if you can slide.
Yep, hit the next slide, we'll show.
This is a game I'm working on right now, and I hope you will be the first person to have it. Yeah, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lual. There are more slides that will come around as we start to get toward our closing hymn, including a slide with the link to Genook Games, where you can go and help fund the work that he is doing. What an honor it is to be in this together. You can pick up a flyer about Lual's work after the service, and the pleasure of being in community, of both letting go and reaching toward, gives us the opportunity to know and be known in entirely new ways. I'm so glad to know you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Yeah.